The Roaring Twenties refers to the decade of the 1920s in Western society and Western culture.
The 20s were known as an exciting decade. World War I was over. The economy was strong. Only 4% didn't have jobs. According to Hubert Hoover, things could not be better.
They started overproducing, and then people came up with these things that pumped the water out of the ground that went onto their plants, because they kept on growing more things to give to the people that are at war. And so when it was done, they had too much land plowed up, and then they're just like, we need to sell this fast before it rots. But they didn't sell most of it. And then they finally gave up because it's just like, what's the point? We just need to get food for us.
So the farmers quit the job, and the farmer quit the farm and grow too many vegetables.
This is one thing that caused the Great Depression. That farmers overdid farming, and that they had pretty much heavier equipment that could get farther down into the dirt to bring up break all the veins to let all of it loose.
They were taking water from the ground, and that was what was keeping the ground moist, so it got all dry.
We're a period of little to no rain, which means there's not enough rain for this to happen, but there's just enough amount of rain, which is none, to make it look like this. It was so dry that this all just got blown away. So something happened that they call the bubble burst. The stock bubble, it just burst. There wasn't any money left in the bank. They all borrowed it all, because that's the saying of that time was buy now, pay later.
So debt is when people borrow money and they use that money to buy vacuums and stocks, and they have to pay more than they got borrowed.
Well, say you borrowed $1,000, then you would have to pay them back $1,100. So they borrowed so much money, there wasn't enough for the bank to even hold. There wasn't any more money in the bank, or in that entire town that they had to return. They thought they had unlimited money. They thought they had more money than they had in real life. They thought they had a whole bunch of money, but really, there's a limit.
The M&M challenge was instead of in the big packets, we had to see how much in groups, and there was 100 or 102 or 150. So and then we didn't know that we get little packs, so there was 14 or 15. So yeah.
Well, in the Great Depression, they had to have little things like candles and stuff, and they would trade it in for money, so then they could buy food. Well, they were paying lots of ornaments and stuff, and then they said that they would give them more for less of money, but they needed that money.
Well, we have lots of water now, and back then they didn't have any water, and that makes me appreciate that we have lots of water.
Keep the trees, don't make it look like that.
people and families had to go to California because there was no dust in California, so they'd be more safer and there'd be a very good farm.
So this is how farming has changed a lot. They use computers like this and machines and the computers tell them what plants need the most attention, and then they can fix the plants so the dust doesn't blow around. This is how they figured out the trees could help stop the dust. Now there's no dust storms, and it's easier to grow crops, and people don't get dust pneumonia that much.
Because you could die and it's not so dusty now.
Back in the Dust Bowl in the old times through the 1930s, it was really hard because they couldn't even harvest crops because there was so much dust that they couldn't harvest crops. And that Franklin Delano Roosevelt made the Dust Bowl better and how they can kind of forget about it for a little bit. Back then, they did make a meal called the poor man's meal, and I don't really know what it was made with, but back then in the Dust Bowl, potatoes and hot dogs were very inexpensive, so they were very cheap, and so also since they had very little money, back then they did play card games like Trash or Bridge, and they did play Scrabble and Monopoly. So,
Banks kind of closed down, and people's savings were gone, which meant that they didn't have money for their food, for their children, for their pets in their houses, so then they didn't really have anywhere to live. So they lived in shanty towns. They weren't the best houses. They were made out of scraps people find in the cities and make little houses of them. So they were not the best houses. They were really small and the families would be really cramped inside. They would look like, you would see blankets, and then you would see metal scraps, wooden scraps. It wouldn't be like the houses you see right now, fancy ones. They would be really not good. Metal would be hanging off and it would be falling apart, but it would still be a little sturdy.
Some people are too poor, they can't even afford a nickel. So they would line up, and some kind people would make big bowls of soup and pour them so they can eat the soup and get a meal.
They had to do it because it helped all those poor people out there. If they didn't eat, then they would just die. This is a picture of a soup line from the 1930s. These are a bunch of men lined up in front of a soup kitchen going to get soup.
Well, this one is that basically in all the pictures, like Simon's, there's men and adults, but in grandmas and stuff. But in this one, they have their own little kid soup kitchen too.
So needs versus wants is kind of something a need is something that you need to live. A want is something that you want to live, to have with so you can live. You don't need it, you want it. Back then they didn't really have very much water source, and they had to go up to other people's houses, and they wouldn't just ask for money, they wanted to work for it. Because it would just be weird to just walk up to someone's house and say, "Can I have some money?" That would just be weird. You would have to work for it.
The Great Migration is where lots of people migrate west and to California. The people that migrate west to California are called Okies. The Californians didn't like the Okies moving in.
It caused overpopulation.
Yep.
Well, they were migrating because they wanted to head away from the huge dust storms and get out of that place. Well, it's a little writing about two men who were by railroad tracks, and one of them mentioned trying to go move to California to get some good fruit.
There were many things they coped with in the Great Depression, and the main thing they used was President Roosevelt's alphabet programs. The 3 R's, 3 R's and the CCC.
That they didn't have anything. They didn't have TVs. They didn't have radios.
Well, they had radios.
Well, they had radios, but not very good ones. They had what was it? Oh, no, those they had phones, but different kinds.
Not like the mobile ones?
Yeah, not like the ones you can just type on.
Relief and help, immediately. People who were starving or about to lose their homes, they got help right away. And then there were other things like recovery and reform, which other people will talk about.
The 3 R's were made by the New Deal programs, which FDR made in his first 100 days of office. Now, he also made the alphabet programs.
Alphabet agency.
The 2 R's we're studying out of the 3 are recovery, reform. Recovery was designed to help the economy bounce back from the Depression. Reforms targeted the causes of the Depression and sought to prevent a crisis like it from happening again.
Back then, kids used to walk. They actually walked, even though in factories. And that was kind of dangerous for them, and that's kind of what I appreciate. And back then, kids, if they had siblings, they'd have to take turns eating each day. One sibling would have to eat one day because they didn't have enough food. And I appreciate that we have a lot of food.
The CCC camps are basically where there are men 18 to 28 in the camp, and they give jobs like building roads and playgrounds and schools and yeah.
Well, to save kind of the environment back then, to save other people, because they would be given a $30 payment every month, and they would keep the 5 and give 25 back to their parents or their families, so their families could buy food and clothes, so their families could stay safer. Well, the CCC, they planted a lot of trees, and so they earned the name Roosevelt's Tree Army.
It helped by giving jobs, because people wanted jobs.
Well, we took a field trip last week to Itasca, and the lady showing us around, she showed us this cabin called the Old Timers Cabin, and that was the first building that was built by the CCC in Itasca, the campgrounds. So it's kind of famous there. Also, I don't think a lot of people really know this, but the CCC, if you go to the headwaters and see those rocks. They aren't natural. The CCC put them down there because Henry Schoolcraft, he introduced other people to Itasca State Park, and they made the river kind of weird. And so the CCC then discovered Itasca, and they put the rocks down, and they put a dam under the rocks so the river could be back to normal. So those rocks aren't natural. They were put there by the CCC.
My topic is the difference of how people farm then and how people improved and how they farm now.
What they would do, they would till up their grass, and they thought that would help because they thought the grass was growing more than their wheat. And then that's how dust storms became.
All their crops would blow away, and that's when they didn't have as much food for their family to feed their whole family, and that's something that I think should stop happening.
One of the ways they did, they stopped tilling up the grass, and they started trying to put so they would, with corn, they would pick the corn cobs off, leave the stalks to die, then they would plant new corn over that.
We thought it would be a good idea to relive the Great Depression, but not in real life, just with the plants. So we experimented, and all of our plants died.
At the start, we got dirt from the farm we went to and brought it to school. And then we planted 3 marigold seeds, each of us. And we had the decision to plant grass seeds. And the people who didn't plant grass seeds had theirs going the best. But the people who did plant grass seeds didn't really have theirs going good. And at the end, all of our plants started to die. A few of us, our plants died before we even got the flower. Some of us got the flower and then it died, like I did.
It related because when the dust cloud hit, it wiped out all the crops and all the animals. Some people. So we had a choice to get rid of, to give our plants to people or not. And I gave my plant to someone, and you know how people didn't have that much food to give away? Well, I was being kind and giving some of my food away to my friends, my neighbors.
Another way that they work together in communities was having penny auctions in the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl. So when a farmer lost their farm because the bank took it away, neighbors would buy animals and give them back to the farmer so that they could get their farm back, and that was penny auctions. So neighbors would help the farmer, working together in communities.
It means if someone's in trouble or if someone's hurt, you help them out to make sure you say if they're okay, and to make sure they need help, and then if they need help, then you help them walk, or you tell them what to do, and then they can stay safe.
Because if you help someone that's poor and needs food, you can save their life a little bit by giving them a little bit of food. Because it was hard to survive back then, because there was so much dust and not much money.
I'm glad that I have food and a house to live in.
I would rather live nowadays because back then it was really hard for people.
Back then they didn't have food that much, they didn't have that much jobs, so I appreciate it now.
You would want to have a roof over your head, like nowadays, because back in the olden days, a lot of people didn't have that because a lot of people were poor and couldn't afford for anything.
Some people gave away all of the things they had for other people who had nothing at all.
We've experienced how to fight the Dust Bowl and I like that when we put our feet on sand, it's not burning our feet.
It was very tough for them because there was all these there were all these challenging things just coming, and they didn't know how to deal with it that well. So they volunteered to help other people. And since a lot of people were broke and they couldn't buy food, so people volunteered to dish out bread and soup in soup kitchens that were like along the street.
It was a good thing because otherwise people wouldn't really have anything. They could like get some bread or something, and like if someone came up to their door or something, give it to them. And then that'd be volunteering in the community.
If you have a little more, but still less, and these people have like nothing, donating and sharing is a good way to like share with people that don't have a lot of stuff.
We were reading this book, and a boy came up to their house and he said, "Do you have any food I can eat or drink?" And they said, "Yeah, come on in." And they barely had anything. They gave him clothes, 5 cents a day, and he said, "Do you have anything I could do?" And they said, "Yeah, you could help us work on the farm." And so, yeah.
They didn't really have like a lot of things to do like we do now, but there was dancing and playing piano and taking walks. Dance-offs are like where you dance against other people. There was like some toys, like wooden toys, and that's pretty much it that they had. There's so much more things you can do now.
Farming has changed a lot. I feel glad about it, that because kids as young as 11 had to do dangerous things. Hobos, which is my topic, they were as young as 11. Their dad and mom don't have enough money to pay the bills or pay for food. But families had to survive on $6. And the bills were too big, so they couldn't pay the bills off. And so if they took their house, they had to send their kids off in the dust. And what hobos did is they ran to catch up to a train, just normal trains, and hobos went off running to chase them, to get onto them, and stay there to find a job.
Let's say if I didn't have any food, then either my friend or someone, they would say, "I can get you some food." And I would say yes, so it's basically taking help. I mean, some people, kind of like me, a little bit shy, so they don't really want to ask for help. Well, because if you didn't ask help, because if you didn't have any food and you never asked help for food, then you died.
It was a lot harder in those days than now because we have a lot of better things so they can help us.
We have more technology that is better so that never comes back.
Yeah, it's just nice to be here in these days.
Heart was all a flutter. The train came roaring round a curve. Peanut butter. A bald-headed man in a restaurant said, "Waiter, my cocoa's cool." The waiter said, "If your cocoa's cold, put on your hat, you fool." Oh, it ain't gonna rain no more, no more. It ain't gonna rain no more. But how in the world can the old folks tell? It ain't gonna rain no more.